Dr. Levy is a very good friend of ours. He is local. He lives here. Not full-time. He's got to warm up and go to Miami in the summer. He is an excellent physician, but more importantly, he is a physician scientist. He bases his work and his practice on data. Data is really an important concept because when you're online or when you're on Instagram, ain't no such thing as data most of the time. It's what we can sell you. You know, you have tinnitus and you go on Instagram and you say, I'm going to tell you the secret to get rid of tinnitus. And you spend 25 minutes listening to this person who's trying to sell you something. Dr. Levy, Elliot Levy, bases all on data and the medical literature. He's a doctor scientist, and around the age of 70, when he was going to retire, he decided, what can I do to help myself live longer? And that's when he started to research the data on it. Needless to say, that has wound up in a book, Live to 120, which we had in the back, which I'm sure he'll be happy to sign. So let us together put our hands together and welcome Dr. Elliot.
Thank you so much for those kind words. I can't tell you what a pleasure and an honor it is to be here. This kind of ranks. Is it still on? There. It ranks with my being invited. Well, some people need a little practice and hearing. It ranks in my life as, along with being asked to be a visiting professor at my alma mater a number of years ago, but to come here in front of all of you and to be included in the book with all those speakers, I feel so happy and honored and just joyous for this situation. There's also one other thing about me that I like to share with everyone, is that I really enjoy teaching. And I like to teach endocrinology fellows, postdoc fellows, medical residents, medical students, and even my own patients. The last couple of years, I've had some high school students working with me, so teaching is something that I really enjoy doing. And I want all of you today to just think about what I'm trying to share with you. For 30 years, when I was a practicing physician, people would come to me for advice. What do I do about this? What should I do? And today, I'm not going to be giving advice. I'm just going to be giving some suggestions, because there's a lot for people to learn about longevity, and hopefully you'll come away with some things. In fact, when I talk, I always like to talk in terms of takeaways. So I hope that everyone has at least one takeaway from my talk today. If you're lucky, maybe it'll be 2 takeaways. And if I'm really lucky and you get 3 takeaways, well, then you can kind of say it was well worth the price of admission. Think about it for a minute. Okay. So I'm going to start with something that I've never done before, and I need some volunteers. And I have a row of people sitting in the front row, so you're my volunteers, whether you ask it or not. Okay. I want everyone to sort of scooch to the front of the chair. Everybody in the audience can do it, but the people involved in the front have the room, so I'm asking them to do it. I expect that some of you may have trouble doing this, and that's okay, and I'll explain it to you when we're through. Okay? Okay, so lean forward, hold your hands out in front of you. Okay. Now lean a little forward, and when I count to 3, I want everyone to stand up. Now this is going to be hard for some people, so don't feel bad. 1, 2, 3, stand up. Okay, my gosh, I didn't expect everyone to pass that. That's what we call a poor man's VO2 max, and I'll explain all that to you as the time goes on. We're always looking for ways that we can, was that the bowl? No. So we can judge how are we doing. Okay, I always like to thank my hosts. And what can you say about Rabbi Mintz? He's wonderful. He's the cement that glues the community together. And he's our spiritual leader. And we value everything that he does for the community so much. And Alan, how can we thank Alan? But just look at all the work that he's put in every year, not just this year. And each year, the speakers get better and more of them. And he told me the other day that this may be his last year. And I'm telling you, Alan, after you hear my talk, I guarantee you, you're not going to quit. Okay, I have to have a special thanks to my wife, who's sitting right here, Dr. Deborah Levy. And Debbie and I have been married, almost 54 years. And we've been on this journey for a long time together. It probably started when I had some medical challenges about 20 some years ago, but it's together that we've been able to achieve so many things in life. But it's very important that if you're going to enter an improvement in your health and doing things to make your life more productive and live longer, you really have to have a partner to do it with. And if you find that you want to do things and your spouse or your partner wants to do it differently, that can create a lot of problems, a lot of conflicts, and we call that mixed marriage. So be careful that when you go on this journey, that you find someone to do it with. But I'd really like to give a special thanks for all of you who came to learn or maybe be entertained, especially those of you who are doctors, nurses, or other healthcare workers. Because honestly, the stuff that I'm going to share with you today is something that we don't learn during our training. This is where I did my training. This is something that even the academic doctors don't really understand themselves. Anyway, I've spoken enough. Let's get the show going. Okay. So we're going to talk today about longevity. Shall we just accept our fate, or is there anything we can do to improve our outcome? I always thought during my life that aging was the inevitable consequence of growing old. But now we can break it down to many other components: genetic, physical, environmental, social, cultural, psychological, biological. So it's much more complicated than just growing old. And who am I? As Alan was so kind enough to say, I'm an academic physician. My specialty was endocrinology. I always like to pride myself in reading the medical literature and making decisions based on facts. I was a clinical professor at the University of Miami. My co-author is Brian Clement, and he calls himself the world's authority on progressive medicine. I call him the world's expert on alternative medicine. He doesn't like that word, but that's okay. So he's very knowledgeable about health and nutrition, including minerals, supplements, vitamins, and their use in preventing or treating illness. For a long time, we were very much apart in our feelings. But as time went on, I began to realize that there's so much about this in lifestyle. And Brian finally came around that maybe we should rely on facts before we make decisions for our patients. So it worked out fine. Okay, in 2021, we sat down for a few hours and studied many different, I call them candidate factors, then spent the next 3 years researching what really works and what the future might hold for us, for our patients, and for our readers, so that we all might be able to live to 120. And that's the goal. And the life expectancy now is about 79 for a woman, 76 for a man. We think that during our lifetimes, there's a good possibility that we can extend it well past 100. Now, because we're of a certain age, we decided to focus on our generation, the baby boomers. We were born between 46 and 64, and looking around, I think there's a lot of us in the audience. Yeah. We were part of the 76.4 million people who were born then, 25% of the American population. Many of our fathers had been drafted or enlisted in the military service and had been away for 2 or 3 years. And because of the boom in births that occurred over those years, our generation was labeled as baby boomers. Okay, if that works, there we go. We are now in our 60s or 70s. Most of us are retired or nearly so. We live in condos in Florida, Arizona, or Palm Springs. We talk about the prices of prescription drugs and worry about outliving our savings. We spend our time, this is my son's quote, we spend our time going to doctors on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday and preparing for those visits on Tuesday and Thursday. We've never taken courses in how to live a long life. Many of us want to do what it takes to live as long as possible. We just need to know what to do, and that's what I'm hoping to share with you. Now, many younger people could certainly benefit from our suggestions. And if you were born before the baby boomer generation, then you guys should be doing the talk, not me, because you're doing something right, and I'm just trying to give you information. In fact, I was anticipating at this very point in my talk that I was going to have our dear friend, longtime person in the summer, David Schechter, take over because David's 96. Unfortunately, David's having some medical setbacks. He could use a speedy recovery, and we're all praying for him. In fact, hopefully David is watching or will be watching tomorrow, and I promised him that I want to dedicate the rest of my talk to David. The statue in the front is a Miami Beach Holocaust monument. So the first question you need to ask yourself is, why do you want to live a long life? In the bottom are a couple of songs that you have. Fame, I want to live forever, I'm going to live forever, I'm going to learn how to fly. There's a lot of songs that talk about longevity. But everybody's different. You may want to dance at your grandchild's wedding. You may want to visit all 7 continents and all 50 states. You want to take a cruise around the world. Some of you may have done this already. You want to see the sunset in the African savannah. You want to play in the sand with your great-grandchildren. But the fact is, in my mind, the most important reason is you want to spend as much time as you can with the people you love and care for the most and who feel the same about you. And there's nothing better than your youngest grandchild or great-grandchild playing with that person. Grandma, you're too old, died. That happened the other day. Okay, so now let's explore what is known now about what causes aging and see what we might be able to do to increase our chances of living longer. Coach, okay. I asked the question, why does a cardiologist tell you to eat right, exercise, take cholesterol-lowering drugs, take blood pressure pills, and avoid stress? Because you don't want to have a heart attack. And why do you not want to have a heart attack? Because you don't want to die. So that's a good reason. Why should we undergo colonoscopy? Because if you do have a cancer in your colon, you want to find it early. And why? Because colon cancer can kill you. So there's a good reason. Why should a woman undergo routine mammograms? Because for the same reason. Breast cancer, for the most part, is curable if it's discovered early, and if you wait too long, the odds are not necessarily on your side. So life expectancy is defined in terms of how long do people live. And as I said before, the average is around 76, 79, something like that. In the last few years, there's actually been a downturn. And we're not sure why that's happened. It's possible that the Western lifestyle has finally caught up to us. In other words, people are eating too much, drinking too much, taking too much medications, all kinds of reasons. Possibly it was COVID a few years ago, but we just have to wait and see. But my opinion is maybe it is our lifestyle that is really causing us not to live so long. People say everything's in the genes, I don't have to worry about it. My father lived to 110 and I'm going to be fine. But the fact of the matter is that the twin study has actually answered that question. This is an older study in which they studied almost 3,000 Danish twins that were separated at relatively young ages, with the thinking being if they were genetically the same, they're going to end up with the same diseases, but they don't. Only about 20% of the time do they have that. So that suggests that it's not genetics, but it's environment that causes people to have problems. So I've divided the solutions into low tech and high tech. To identify a problem and not come up with a solution is not fair to everybody. So I like to talk first about the low tech solutions and then about the high tech. So I'm a scientist, we like pie charts. So number 1 is diet, number 2, exercise, number 3, keep using your brain, number 4, sense of community, number 5, spirituality, and if we have time, we'll talk about number 6. Diet. A lot of people think that this may be the most important factor. My co-author, Brian, believes this very strongly. I think you have to do everything, and diet is certainly very important. Now, diet is a bad word, because no one really knows what it is, or can be defined in many ways. Most people like talk about, let's go on a diet. We don't like the way we look in the mirror. We know we've gained weight and our clothes don't fit. We have an event to attend, such as a wedding, reunion, a visit to see old friends. We're looking for a job and know that body imagery in our society favors a certain look. And sometimes we've been diagnosed with medical problems, such as digestive problems, type 2 diabetes, hypertension, or heart disease, and are advised to lose weight to help those conditions. But the problem is that diets don't work. This chart was given to me by Bob Kushner at Northwestern, and if you can see the natural tendency diagonally up, a person goes on the diet, things happen, they lose weight, but then things happen to their body. First of all, there are hormones that are secreted that actually prevent the body from taking itself apart. Those are leptin and ghrelin. Also, anybody who's been on a diet knows it's very hard to stay on a diet long term, so this is the condition that's associated with what we call recidivism, which means sooner or later you get tired. So diets don't work, but yet there are plenty of them out there. I had about 46 and I cut them down. That Atkins diet, paleo diet, TLC diet, Ornish diet, Dr. Weil's anti-inflammatory diet, Arthur Agatson's South Beach diet. Most new diets are recycled old ones, and most are associated with something you can buy. But that doesn't mean you can't pay attention to this. Right now, the most popular program to be on is what people call a Mediterranean diet. That's sort of a generic term based on the traditional eating habits in the countries bordering the Mediterranean Sea. There's not one standard Mediterranean diet. Some scientists even call this Mediterranean style diet. Now, the famous New York Times, whatever you think of it, says the Mediterranean diet really is that good for you, and here's why. In 2018, researchers looked at 26,000 women and found that those who followed the Mediterranean diet most closely for 12 years or more had about a 25% reduced risk of developing cardiovascular disease, mainly because of changes in blood sugar, chronic inflammation, and body mass index, the researchers reported. But what if we start with a Mediterranean style diet that is rich in fruits, vegetables, legumes, whole grains, nuts, seeds, lean proteins, and healthy fats, and change the protein source from animal products, beef, pork, chicken, fish, eggs, and dairy, to that of plants. You get what we call a plant-based diet, or technically, whole foods, plant-based diet, WFPF. And this is what it is. Vegetables, grains, beans, fruit, nuts, seeds, herbs and spices, and minimally processed plant-based foods. Maybe there's something to it. This chart was given to me by Neil Barnard. He's a physician scientist in Washington, D.C. And just looking at body weight as an index, a small study, that those on a Mediterranean diet did fairly well, but if you convert that to a vegan diet, you do even better. But again, small study, not long, but it's important. So let's talk a bit about plant-based eating. When you do a Google search, like we all do, you can have page after page after page of plant-based diets. You have to figure out what works for you. Maybe you're the kind of person who likes to read books. Forks Over Knives, Self-Healing Diet, the Vegan Starter Kit, Why is a Plant-Based Diet More Sustainable, Plant-Based Diet in 30 Days, and my favorite, Plant-Based Diet for Dummies. Now there are plenty of plant-based restaurants all over the country. ABCV is one of the hardest restaurants to get into. It's a vegetarian restaurant on the Lower East Side, ABC Carpeting, any of you New Yorkers. West Palm Beach has Hippocrates, where we like to go all the time. Miami Beach has one called Planta. Aspen has Spring Cafe. And then I pulled this up. That's San Diego, and there's so many in Southern California. And if you really get stuck, you can go to the website called Happy Cow, where you type in where you are, and it'll come up with all kinds of suggestions of where you can find plant-based food. Okay, so let's change gears and talk a bit about exercise. I personally feel that exercise is as important as eating. And this is Aspen. This is Aspen, where people are all into exercise, and I'm almost like preaching to the choir here, but I want to share with you my feelings. Okay, how many of you exercise regularly? Rhetorical question. What do you mean by regularly? So this comes from a division of the National Institutes of Health, and what they reported is adults aged 65 and older need at least 150 minutes a week. That's not a whole lot. 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week of moderate intensity activities such as brisk walking, or they need 75 minutes of vigorous intensive activity such as hiking, jogging, biking, or running. At least 2 days a week of activities that strengthen muscle, which is basically weight training, plus activities to improve balance. And even with these minimal requirements, only 26% of seniors were regularly active, and 16% perform vigorous activity at least 3 times a week. So it tells me that across the country, there's a lot of room for improvement. Now, this just came out recently. Walking 11 minutes each day could add years to your life, published in a British Journal of Sports Medicine. And they looked at a meta-analysis where you can group together many different studies. And they said that 75 minutes of moderate intensity exercise, such as walking, had a 23% lower risk of early death, 11 minutes a day. So I happen to be an advocate of more intense exercise. And I like people to exercise to their target heart rate. So what is target heart rate? It's sort of an arbitrary type of calculation in which you take 220 minus your age in years. Don't do it, I have it for you in the next slide. Multiply that number by 60% to give the lower target range. Multiply that by 80% to give the higher target range. And for someone who's, let's say, 78, that the target range should be between 85 and 114. So a 78-year-old person doing intense exercise should target their heart rate to be between 85 and 114. How can you measure that? Well, you can take your heart rate on your wrist. That's pretty easy. I can teach you how to do that. You can do it on your Apple Watch. I happen to be a biker, so I have Garmin stuff and a Garmin Forerunner. And if you don't want to spend a lot of money, you can buy a Fitbit. This is how much they cost. Not a whole lot. Okay, an Apple Watch is $250. The Garmin Watch is a little bit more expensive. The Fitbit is a little bit less. You can buy the generic knockoffs. But the idea is you should watch yourself so that you exercise in your target heart range. About 3 weeks ago, I was in the gym doing a spinning class. We live in Miami, and it's getting very dangerous to bicycle in Miami because of the rude drivers who don't really care about cyclists. So we do spinning. And the other day, I was spinning, And I kept looking at my watch, and the teacher said in front of everybody, "Elliot, the class is going to be over really soon. Why do you keep looking at your watch?" And I said, "Cece, I'm looking at my heart rate because I want to keep it in the target range." That was the last time she ever said anything to me. Okay, so here, you know where you fit in, and I did the calculations for you, and that should be your target range. And this is a fairly easy thing to do, but this is how I think you really stress your heart to build up your endurance and your muscle of the heart, and I think this is the best thing for a person to do. There are outdoor activities, jogging, walking, biking, hiking, playing tennis. There's indoor activities, lots of different things, even walking stairs. That's tough for me here, walking stairs. But the idea is there's no excuses. Exercise is extremely important to everyone as far as how to improve their life. If you've never done exercise and you're over 65, I do recommend that you have a stress test. God forbid there's something wrong that you don't know about it. I'd rather it be done in a doctor's office or a hospital than have it on the street. Okay, let's go to the next factor. Keep using your brain. I want to introduce you to three people that I know. Jeremiah Stamler was one of my attendings when I was in medical school, quite a few years ago. And he is the father of preventive cardiology. He died at age 102, and the day before, he was writing a research grant for his work. The next person is Louis Mandel, and Dr. Mandel is an oral maxillofacial surgeon whose specialty is in salivary glands. And on his 100th birthday, his book was published, The Medical Aspects of Salivary Glands. And the last person on my right is Uncle Joe Wolf, Debbie's uncle. Uncle Joe lives in Florida in an area called Century Village. And if you don't know what Century Village is, it kind of is what it sounds like. It's a place where there's a lot of older people who basically sit around the pool and talk about each other. But Uncle Joe had a job, and what he did was keep track of about 125 apartments. And somehow he managed to keep the keys straight, and he knew everybody's key. And once a week he would go around, open the door, make sure the air conditioner was working, make sure the toilets were flushing, and the water wasn't running, and there were no leaks. And he charged, I think, $5 a week. But that's what he did up until age 98, when his son decided it was time to move to a retirement home. So he moved to Baltimore and stayed there. And we were at his 100th birthday, and it was wonderful. 2 weeks later, he fell and broke his hip, had a very difficult time recovering. 3 years later, he fell and broke the other hip, and he never quite recovered. But he made it to 103. And I think these are examples of if you keep using your brain, what you might be able to accomplish. So continuing to work longer is consistent with increased longevity. Learning promotes brain health and mental stimulation, which could limit the debilitating effects of aging on memory and the mind. Engaging in mentally stimulating activities, even late in life, may decrease the risk of mild cognitive impairment. Okay. Types of mentally stimulating activities include reading books, playing games, craft activities, computer use, and I'm going to mention about luminosity in a minute, social activities such as going to movies and theaters. But the one activity that seems to have the biggest effect is computer use. Lumosity is a free computer program that if you guys have not had, download it on your phone. And if you're ever waiting on hold for the American Airlines to come to answer the phone, or and have nothing to do while you're waiting for a plane to take off, just play the games. They're constantly stimulating your brain. And a number of years ago, a professor from the University of North Florida shared with me that she thinks that expands your working memory of your brain. Working memory is a computer term for RAM. You might know RAM on your computer, but it's something that you really need to do. Now let's hope this works. This is my friend, Elizabeth. Let's see.
Hi everyone, my name is Elizabeth. Thanks for giving me a chance to speak to you. Elliot, Brian, and I all feel strongly that keeping your mind busy learning new things is critical to slowing down the aging process and living longer. We suggest that you continue to work as long as you can. Don't retire until you have to. When you do retire, you will still need a purpose in life. We recommend that you do something you enjoy, do something that you are good at, and do something that will help other people. If you need to earn money to supplement your retirement savings, that is important as well. Continue to do things like visiting museums, going to theater or movies, reading and discussing books, reading the newspaper or reading online news. It is very important that you continue to challenge your brain every day. Learning new computer skills may even be the best way to challenge your brain. Learning computer skills is great for stimulating your brain. If you do not know how to email, have someone, like your grandchildren, teach you. Learn how to attach documents to an email. Learn how to use a spreadsheet or to make a PowerPoint presentation. Teach yourself how to use Photoshop. Learn about Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and WhatsApp, if for no other reason, so you can keep in touch with your friends and family. Figure out how to use online banking. If you live in a city with an Apple store, think about going there for their classes. The instructors are great. There is so much more for you to learn. Just start. As a closely held secret, I am very good friends with Dr. Levy. In fact, he created me and this entire video using artificial intelligence, commonly called AI. You can do that as well if you decide to learn.
So,
Enjoy the rest of this presentation.
I taught myself how to use AI, but I use it in certain ways. These are things you can do if you really want to. Now, AI, speaking of that, is not always perfected just yet. At this audience, I think everybody knows what Purim is, but if those of you who don't know, it's a Jewish holiday actually celebrating how successful the Jews were in Persia. Isn't that strange? But everybody knows about Queen Esther and Hamantashes and Haman riding his horse, but it's traditional to have a festive meal called a Suda. And we were, a couple of years ago, we were at a Suda in Bal Harbor. I think there might be some people here who live in Bal Harbor. It's an absolutely gorgeous community along the ocean, just a little bit north of Miami, and we were having fun there. And then our son called us, who lives in Fort Lauderdale, about an hour north, and asked us where were we going to come to his Suda, because we promised we would. So Debbie got the text message and she dictated back. Are you guys coming? I'm confused. Yes, we're on our way. We're at another porn party in Bal Harbor. So it's not quite perfect.
Oh, that's so cute.
Okay, let's go to community, or the concept of socialization. Very important. There are something called the Blue Zones. You might have met Dan Buettner. He's been in Aspen before. He goes around the country talking, and he's a medical anthropologist who was challenged by National Geographic magazine to find the places in the world where people live to over 100. And he identified 5 of those, and they weren't exactly the same. They were close enough, but there were some factors that he teased out to make us understand a little better. Moderate, regular physical activity. Purpose in life. I think that's very important. Stress reduction. Moderate caloric intake. Plant-based diet, although not everybody in every blue zone is plant-based. Moderate alcohol intake. And engagement in spirituality or religion. Engagement in family life. So these very small communities all seem to have those kinds of concepts together. Last summer, we met Dr. Vivek Murthy, who was a Surgeon General of the United States during Obama and then during Joe Biden. And he was talking about the loneliness epidemic. Loneliness is just as significant epidemic now as smoking was 20 years ago. Human connection is in need. 50% of adults are living in loneliness and isolation. People who are lonely are more susceptible to infection, are in a chronic stress situation, have 29% increase in heart disease and 50% increase in dementia. These are impressive statistics. Loneliness is a really serious situation. And this was really made worse during COVID a few years ago, in which people were not only lonely, but they couldn't leave their house. So that's when the epidemic was at its highest. And he says that service is the antidote to loneliness. So what that means is, in addition to having a lot of friends, do something productive that can help other people. And that's going to help you as an individual. Dr. Ruth got into this. This was her last book, The Joy of Connections, and she talks about that also. So let's talk a bit about spirituality. Is Rabbi Mintz here? I don't see him. Okay, so 3 years ago, over the Jewish holidays, Rabbi Mintz's brother-in-law, Levy's brother, is Rabbi Beryl Light from Sydney, Australia. And I had a chance to sit actually in this room, and I asked him, I said, Rabbi Light, are there any places in the Bible, in the Torah, that talks about longevity? Because if the Torah goes back 5,000 years, then people might have been thinking about that long ago. And he didn't hesitate. He knew exactly what to say. The fifth commandment, honor your father and your mother. But people don't know the second half of that. So that your days may be long upon the land which the Lord your God has given you. I remind my kids of that every single day. The second one is a little bit more obscure. And it goes something like this. If you happen to come upon a bird's nest along the way, in a tree or on the ground with young ones or eggs, and the mother sitting on the young or on the eggs, you shall not take the mother with the young. You shall certainly let the mother go, but the young you may take for yourself, in order that it may be well with you and that you may prolong your days. No one knows exactly what that means. I was hoping Rabbi Mintz would help me, but he's not here, so you have to take my interpretation. It may be compassion, and if you're a compassionate person, there's a good chance that may help you. Last summer, we had a chance to meet Francis Collins, and Dr. Collins was the former director of the NIH and the director of the Human Genome Project. In other words, it was his team that synthesized the DNA. And in the question and answer period, I asked him the question, are there any scientific studies that indicate intense spirituality is associated with increased longevity? He didn't hesitate to say, here's a paper, and he sent me the paper the next day. There's definitely a link between spirituality and longevity. Spiritual practices and beliefs contribute to longer lifespans. Purpose in life is associated with the 17% reduced mortality risk. Life satisfaction is associated with 12% reduced mortality. Religious service attendance was associated with a lower risk of death from despair. And attending a religious service more than once per week was associated with 33% lower all-cause mortality compared to those who had never attended religious services. So I've been trying to get Rabbi Mintz to advertise this so we can have our whole hall finished for Saturday morning services. Okay, so as my interpretation of what it could be, what could it be about spirituality? Is it the social support that you get with the community, psychological well-being, positive coping, life purpose, health behavior, stress reduction? Whatever it is, there seems to be a definite connection between spirituality and longevity. Number 6, I'm going to have to wait till the end because we're running a little bit late, so maybe some of the last. Well, if you can prevent it, can you reverse it? There are at least 3 books in which you can reverse heart disease by everything that I just said. Dean Ordish was the first, Dr. Esserstein, and Joel Furman. If you haven't seen this video, It was about a year ago. It was on CNN, and Sanjay Gupta presented The Last Alzheimer's Patient, in which he went over with Dean Ornish and with several other very well-known physician scientists that if you can find a patient early on, there are definite things you can do to either slow down or maybe even reverse mild dementia. Again, it's mild, and they categorize dementia in a scientific way. Someone who's far advanced may not be so fortunate, but it's basically lifestyle. And it's all the things that I had mentioned before. But speaking of, so what Dean Ornish says is what is good for the heart is good for the brain. So I add to these thoughts, lifestyle change can prevent or reverse type 2 diabetes, hypertension, peripheral vasculitis, osteoarthritis, inflammatory bowel disease, eczema, autoimmune disease, maybe cancer, although we don't have a good longitudinal studies yet. But I think there's something to it. Now, speaking of dementia, I thought that I would throw in a couple slides here. Dementia is most commonly caused by Alzheimer's, not exclusively. And as the size of the United States population, age 65 or older, continues to grow, so too will the number and proportion of Americans with Alzheimer's disease. By 2030, all of us, the baby boomers, will be age 65 or older, the age range of greatest risk of Alzheimer's dementia. But all is not dismal right now. Last week, Dr. Ken Davis, who was the CEO of Mount Sinai Healthcare System and just an amazing neuroscientist, talked a little bit about something called p-tau217. That is a protein that helps stabilize the structure of nerve cells. Don't worry about the science. In Alzheimer's disease, tau proteins can become abnormally phosphorylated, which contribute to what's called neurofibrillatory tangles that damage nerve cells and contribute to disease. But in the last 2 years, they've been able to have a blood test that measures p-tau217. And at first it was very hard to come by. Now it can be obtained in specialty labs, but it's also available at LabCorp, and Quest. I just looked this up yesterday. The cost is between $100 and $500, and it's not yet covered by insurance. So what does that mean? Well, if you're p-tau217 positive, what can you do? Several approaches are there to remove or reduce amyloid plaques in the brain, which are a hallmark of Alzheimer's disease. There are monoclonal antibodies, which target and clear amyloid beta, the protein that clumps together to form plaques. So what Dr. Davis said is, it's only a matter of time before the pharmaceutical industry will be getting into this, because if they have a drug that can remove the p-tau, maybe it's important that we find the people that have it so they can be prescribed the drugs. That's not really my style. What about diet, exercise, mental stimulation, and yoga, which has been shown to slow down and maybe reverse early dementia? Maybe lifestyle change should be initiated right now rather than just medication. Again, a rhetorical question, but that's my thought. Now, let's say all of you in this room decided you're going to make a change in your life. Unfortunately, I think it's hard to get started. I think there's a role for what I call a residential program, some people call it jail, where you go and maybe take your partner or spouse or significant other for 2 to 3 weeks to get started. It's very hard to meet with a dietitian, a trainer, psychologist, yoga specialist, on and on and on, when all of your friends will constantly try to sabotage you. And Debbie and I have had the opportunity to visit many times different places around the country. And you can go on a cruise for 2 weeks, and you come back, drunk too much, ate too much, gained weight, not sleeping well, not exercise, or you can go to one of these centers. At the end of 2 weeks, you might lose 5 to 10 pounds. You feel like $1 million. You have more energy than you ever can imagine. And it gives you enough conviction that you can hold it for a long time. But we like to go back periodically, which is something I would encourage. Unfortunately, humans like the easy way out. So let's explore the high-tech solutions. The first category is treatments. Human growth hormone, been around for a while. Unfortunately, if you have too much growth hormone, let's say you have a pituitary tumor, you end up with gigantism, or what's called acromegaly. These people have a premature death. Growth hormone doesn't help. Stem cells may really be the fountain of youth. It's just that we're not quite there yet. We have a lot of experience. Unfortunately, it's not available in the United States, so you have to go on a stem cell vacation someplace, Costa Rica, Panama, Cuba, wherever it is that you go. You don't really know what you're getting. You don't know where the same stem cells came from. You don't know if they were grown in the laboratory. You don't know how much you're getting. You know if the doctor is going to follow you properly. So it's there. It's very important. Research really needs to be done. And it's something for the future. I'm not saying not to take stem cells. I'm just saying I would like to see a little more longitudinal studies. Hyperbaric oxygen therapy is the next one. Alan and Judy, you want to comment on that or not? They both had the opportunity to visit the one in the villages. I don't want you to tell us about the villages, but tell us about hyperbaric oxygen. Do you guys feel that there's a role for this or not? Alan?
It was a very positive experience. It is 3 months long. So it is a big time commitment. You have to live there to do it, but I would certainly recommend it. I have a book that was written by the founder if anybody wants more information. I don't want to take more time.
That's fine. So it's there for people to take advantage of if they want to. It means a major commitment. I do know that the nerve cells likes oxygen. And if you can force more oxygen into their brains and to the peripheral nerves, maybe you can help these people. My theory. Very low calorie diets. Very, very interesting. Laboratory researchers who work on worms and nematodes and mice, if they want to do a longevity study, they starve the animals and they can actually double the lifespan. But if a lifespan of a worm is 3 days, to go to 6 days, it sounds like it's good, and it probably is. But there's a long jump from mice to humans. The very low calorie diets are things that people try. There's a society of people who really starve themselves all day long, and they claim that they are going to live longer. On the other hand, there are the young women mostly who suffer from anorexia nervosa, and they have very little calorie intake. They don't do really well. Again, it's a research opportunity, not yet science. Contrast therapy, people like this, hot and cold plunges. You go from one to the other, not my thing, but a lot of people like that. The next one, it has a lot of potential. It's called parabiosis. A parabiosis means you're transferring blood or plasma or subcellular organelles from the blood of young, healthy donors to older recipients. It's been known for many, many years. It works in mice. Not sure if it works in humans. Ongoing clinical investigations are still looking at this. And the same way with subcellular organelles. In fact, I'm going to ask my friend Dr. Sinrich to come up, and Mark's worked in the field of exosomes. Why don't you tell us about exosomes and if you think there's any role for longevity?
Okay, well, exosomes are a subcellular particle. We are basically a collection of cells. The whole body is made up of cells. Originally it was thought that when looking under the microscope, there were these little droplets that were believed to be the excrement of cells or the waste product of cells. It turns out that these things carry little packets of messenger RNA, and it's basically a way that cells communicate with each other. Cells go through a process of becoming zombie cells or senescent cells before they die. And at that point, that their senescent cell can turn into a cancer cell. So it's believed that exosomes possibly can turn off and on the cellular mechanisms. It's very, very complicated, but one thing that I do want to amplify what Elliot said is that with stem cells, with exosomes, with PRP, which a lot of people publicize and you see it in the paper, You wouldn't take an aspirin without knowing how many milligrams it was, or a Tylenol, how much acetaminophen was, whether it was 1 gram or half a gram. Acetaminophen is toxic to your liver. It's the same way many people may know somebody in this community who died going to getting stem cells, seeking out longevity. You got to be very careful when you go and take PRP or stem cells to know what you're getting, how many you're getting, how many milligrams, how many cells, the quality and the quantity of those cells.
Thank you very much. See, there's a lot going on that we don't really know about, and part of what we want you to know is to just know that this stuff is out there.
Let the buyer beware.
I have that too. Okay, so what about eating healthy? Like any other teenager, I went to ChatGPT and asked Chat, what can you eat to increase longevity? So number 1 is beans, and I was hoping Levy would be here because I want to get her to start making vegetarian cholent on Shabbos. I said this to Rebbitzin Shiner in Palm Beach Synagogue, and she, sure enough, started making vegetarian cholent. Cruciferous vegetables, broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, cabbage, blueberries, strawberries, collard greens, arugula, bok choy, mustard green, walnuts, Ceylon cinnamon, as opposed to the kind that comes from Indonesia, whole grains, green tea, and one more, avocados. So again, it doesn't hurt, but this is something that you want to do, you might as well. That's sort of how we live, so that can be done. Red light therapy, another type of therapy that people advocate. Medicinal mushrooms. I like lion's mane, shiitake, and maitake. You can buy them in the mushroom stand in the farmer's market. I have mushroom coffee, and actually you get used to it, and it tastes. Do these make a difference? Well, it might. This is not the kind of mushrooms, magic mushrooms, like some of us might have experimented in college. Not at all. Mushrooms have a lot of theoretical advantages to helping people live a long life. And if you haven't seen the movie Fantastic Fungi, it's well worth seeing. Is Coco here? No. Okay, so I'm going to talk about yoga, meditation, and Tai Chi. There are people who say these are really important things to do to help you calm yourself down, relax yourself, and focus on what's important to you in your life. I wasn't a yoga person, but I go with my wife every afternoon at 4 o'clock to O2, and we do yin yoga. And it's a great opportunity for older people like us to really feel good, stretch, and walk out feeling great. And it's every afternoon, 4 o'clock. But the other day, I was riding to the top of Maroon Bells, and on the way down, I said, wow, this is an experience. I was going about 35 miles an hour, there was no other bikes, no traffic, and I had, it takes me about 45 minutes, 50 minutes to go up, and about 20 minutes to come down. So for those 20 minutes, I just let my mind just wander. And I was really able to focus on a lot of things that were really important to me. And I said, well, maybe this is a type of meditation. And along things like looking at waves come in on a beach or a fire, there may be other ways to meditate than just sitting with your legs crossed. And I came back and talked to Rabbi Mintz, and I said, Rabbi Mintz, why don't we have a ride and learn session? What do you mean? Well, we'll meet here around 9:30 in the morning on our bikes. If you don't have a bike, you can rent one right in front. And we'll all ride up to the top to Maroon Bells. There are picnic tables, so we can reserve a picnic table. And you'll give us a session, a learning session, either something from the Torah, the Talmud, what's going on in Jewish life. And then we'll all ride down, and we'll ride down on our own. And I said, then we'll come back to the Chabad here. And I said, wow, this is a really good checklist. Exercise, biking up the mountain, check. Should go faster. Learning with rabbi, spiritual, check. Community, talking with your friends on the way up, check. Meditation, biking down the mountain, check. And a healthy lunch at Chabad that Debbie and I will sponsor, check. It does it all. What a wonderful way to do everything all at once, only in Aspen.
Yes.
Okay. So now we'll talk for the remaining few minutes about biologics, because this is what people want to hear about, and there's a lot of people who believe in them. So in order only to understand aging and all its manifestation, you must understand inflammation. There are two types of inflammation, what's called acute inflammation and chronic inflammation. Acute inflammation is sunburn, or you step on a needle, or you twist an ankle, in which you have a whole cascade of things. Your ankle gets swollen, it hurts, it takes a long time to recover, but eventually do. Chronic inflammation is totally different. The word is probably a bad word that's synonymous, but they're not. It's not really the same. Chronic inflammation may actually be what causes the body to age. And these are all the diseases that are associated with it. Macular degeneration, arteriosclerotic heart disease, certain types of lung problems, chronic hepatitis, certain inflammatory bowel disease, skin diseases, Alzheimer's disease, thyroid, and I kind of lived in the area of thyroid autoimmunity. That was my specialty. Type 1 diabetes, kidney problems, joint disease, immune system problems. This is all caused by chronic inflammation. And it can be broken down into very more scientific kinds of things. But as people age, they accumulate damaged cells. When cells get to a certain level of damage, they go through cellular aging that is called cellular senescence. When cells become damaged, or if they replicate too many times, they undergo a process of irreversible removal from the cell cycle and start removing inflammatory factors called cytokines and chemokines that stimulate the immune system response to try to clear those cells. But aging may actually be caused by what's called an accumulation of zombie cells, which are cells that are damaged and refuse to die. They formerly called senescent cells. These cells don't die, they just leak out stuff continuously that causes the immune system to be stimulated. So what we would like to do is remove those zombie cells, prevent them from occurring in the first place, and remove the damaging contents. Sounds good. Want to live forever? Flush out your zombie cells. So here's a few. I'm not going to go too much. Nicotinamide, NAD is one that they talk about. Some people like an IV. As you can tell, I like to make slides, and this is intentionally very busy. You're not supposed to read it all, but just there's a whole lot of potential agents. And the interesting thing is that many of these you can actually buy yourself, either at Whole Foods, GNC, Amazon, and these are potentially agents that can actually prevent the accumulation of this debris or actually remove it. How do we know if any of this works? That's my question. So a good physician scientist who is advising any type of intervention for a patient, remember, I'm not advising, I'm just making suggestions, needs to have some parameters to observe or to measure or to judge whether the treatment is working and whether a change in treatment or even discontinuing treatment is indicated. So it's hard to use chronological age. You know, if someone is destined to reach age 79 and they reach 81 or they outlive their projected age, very unscientific. So since we know that aging is very complicated, affecting every person differently and every cell and every organ differently, what options do we have? So this is what we call biomarkers, biological age, have a marker for disease, and I'll give you a couple examples. The normal blood sugar is 80 to 120. If you do a random blood sugar in your doctor's office and the result's 350, you'll be diagnosed as having diabetes, your doctor will prescribe treatment, and then he'll use blood sugar or another marker called hemoglobin A1C to judge control of your diabetes. So blood sugar and A1C are considered biomarkers which can be used to monitor treatment success. Blood pressure, same thing. If you go to your doctor's office or your healthcare provider's office, your blood pressure is high, your provider diagnoses high blood pressure and recommends weight loss, low salt diet, stress avoidance, and medication. And you return in a few weeks and your blood pressure is better, so everybody's happy. So that's another biomarker. But now for longevity, it's a little bit more complicated. There are all kinds of biomarkers that are out there. In just the biomarker for brain aging, there's about 100 different ones. We don't know which are the right ones or which combination of biomarkers are going to be the most important. This is an active research area. Those are all the different ones that I could find. There's so many of them, and it's really going to take very large studies using AI to monitor all this so that you can get an idea of what's the best ones. The ones that we like the most are telomere length, although that's becoming not so popular now, and DNA methylation. And the most important one that I think right now is called DNA methylated CRP. CRP is inflammatory reaction. Again, a so-called poor man's biomarker is what's called VO2 max. VO2 max is when you do a stress test and you have a mask on your face and you're measuring how efficient your body is in using oxygen. Seems to be the best biomarker right now to predict longevity. Grip strength, another one that they talk about a lot. Okay, so improving grip strength, and there's lots of ways to do that. Hand grips, but as they're in Aspen, people like to drink, buy wine with a screw top. Okay, so those are the biomarkers. Should anybody be taking biologics? Well, ask David Sinclair, who's probably the most famous person in this field. He was here maybe 2 summers ago, and this is what he recommends. You can buy all this stuff. This is his concoction. Unfortunately, David Sinclair has his own website and sells all this stuff. So this is almost a conflict in my mind. He liked resveratrol, and another guru, Peter Attia, said maybe not so good. So my concerns are the research studies for each biologic control for the recommended lifestyle, how many subjects were studied, and how the researchers measure success. There's a lot of storefronts where you sell these things. We were at a place in Spanish Harlem, Washington Heights in New York City, and I found the sign by the parking lot. Okay, Reed Lyon from NIH said there's evidence-based research, evidence-based, research-based, or nonsense-based. So you got to figure out where all this starts. And unfortunately, profiteering has answered this. So you can either believe your scientist or believe your guru. And there's quite a few doers, and this is the one that I like to talk about. If you play blackjack, you have to know that the dealer's odds of winning a hand are 49%. The player's odds is 42%. But you can increase your odds of winning by knowing when to double down, when to split cards, knowing when to hit on your hand after seeing what the dealer has, and know when to take insurance. Because winning is a combination of skill and luck. And what I say is that it's better to be lucky than to have a good doctor. But the more information that you have, the better you are when it has to make decisions. And life is all about making decisions. Suggestions, follow the modifications I talk about. Always begin with somebody else. Consider a residential program. Be careful with taking biologics and considering entering a clinical trial. And honestly, I'm not sure that your primary care physician will understand any of this yet. Okay, question and answers real fast. Jordan, you had a question. I'm going to answer this for him. The next question is, what's number 6? Okay, for that, who could tell us better about the health benefits of sex than the past president of the International Society for the Study of Women's Sexual Health, the largest international multidisciplinary professional society dedicated solely to female sexual function and dysfunction, and my co-author on this chapter, our own Dr. Alan Altman. And Alan, I'm going to ask him to share a little bit of what I have in the book.
Thank you. Thanks for staying. This is all important information, but if you would just put all of the things up on here, I'm not going to take very long. Sex is incredibly important. Sex is important by yourself. It's important with a partner. It's important reading about. Let me explain to you why. The brain runs our body. If we're sitting down to eat a meal, the brain sends blood flow to the GI tract. Why? Because you need to digest your food. If you're going to work out in the gym, the brain sends blood flow, including the oxygen and nutrients in the blood, to the musculoskeletal system because you're going to be working your muscles. That's kind of why if you've just had a heavy meal and the blood is going to the GI tract to help you digest your food, it's probably why you ought not work out. Remember, they used to tell you if you go swimming after you eat, you get cramps. This is the whole point. The brain sends blood flow where it's needed. Now, if you're having sex, if you're thinking about having sex, if you're watching somebody having sex, if you're reading about somebody having sex, your brain sends blood flow to your genitalia. That blood flow to the genital organs is extremely important because it keeps them healthy. It's a very sophisticated medical concept. Use it or lose it. And it goes for everywhere in your body, not just with sex. But you see up here the surprising health benefits, I'm not surprised by them, of sex after 65. After the 65th time, or after the age of 65. Any kind of sexual activity that you have sends blood flow to the genitalia. That's why men get an erection. That's why women get swollen labia, a swollen clitoris, more lubrication. All this stuff is good to continue, and you don't have to do it with a partner. Many women have to deal with a partner who just can't necessarily perform this kind of thing, but it can still be with the partner. It can still be closeness. It could still be what we call not intercourse, but outer course. Just the idea of sharing this and stimulating the genitalia. This is so important, and it's got to do with all systems of the body, not just the genitalia. So let your brain do this by inviting your brain to send blood flow based on what you're doing, reading, or trying to do, vibrators, whatever. All of this is important to continue in some way, shape, or form. These are the benefits that you see here. It definitely helps extend your life. We have data showing that. So try this out. Next slide. Okay, it's your slide.
When I gave this talk in our neighborhood in Florida, I heard of this poor woman walk out and talking to her friend, and she said, because she was talking about her husband that had passed away a couple of years ago, I told him we should have done it more. Now, if you're excited, enthusiastic, eager, aroused, and can't wait to get this whole lifestyle change going, and there they are, ready to go. This should go faster. Some of you may know that on the campus here there are some cabins, and I convinced Rabbi Mintz to convert one of the cabins to a honeymoon suite, where the charge is $50 an hour, goes to the Chabad, and on the nightstand there's a copy of the book, and you can read it to each other, but you've got to bring your own sheets. And if you're really having difficulty, the right-hand drawer you pull it out and there's some pills in a jar there. But you gotta go quickly, otherwise you might fall asleep. So I'm gonna end with a quote from Dr. Michael Greger, who's a real nutritional expert. I don't mind dying, I just don't want it to be my fault. And here, this is my last slide. I am going to have a book signing in the back. And if any of you are soccer players or fans, that's a picture of me in my young age when I played for the Argentine soccer team. So our programmer photoshopped my face and passed. I'm done.
Thank you.